one piece. Money is going to be spent in our community, and we live right here across from Moody Gardens. This is where we have created our home for many, many, many years. I am a longtime participant in this community, and I really consider myself one of us. I think it's important to have somebody who is local on the bench, because when somebody sees and thinks the way that we see and think and feel, then we know that they're going to understand where we're coming from, right? So whether you have yourself who has been pulled into the court system, or you have a family member, or you have a friend, you want to be sure that the person who is deciding your fate or your family's member's fate understands the law, knows how to apply it, and is going to be fair when they do it. So a little bit about my background. I already mentioned that I am a St. Regis Mohawk Indian. My mother is a full-blood Mohawk, and my dad is just a regular white guy. So one of the things that I've really grown up knowing is the differences that can be between people just because of the way they look and how they act, right? My mom always tells stories about how it was when I was little. She would push me around town, and she was always afraid that people were going to say, "Where'd you get that white baby?" Because I look like my dad. So I have always been very aware and very cognizant of the inequality and how some people have to fight more than other people just to get kind of the same things. I think that comes from my background being a minority, and I think it comes from my background being a woman. So I know what it's like to have to struggle. I know what it's like to have to work harder than other people. And I know here in Galveston County that there are people who are specifically targeted. Now, our justice system strives to be equal towards everybody. That's just not always the case. There are certain people who, for instance, minorities and people who don't have the same funds as everybody else, who get pulled over more often than their other counterparts. Minorities and people of color, when they are pulled over, are more likely to be arrested in our county. Once they are arrested, they are more likely to remain incarcerated. And when they finally are adjudicated, if they are adjudicated, they are more likely to get harsher sentences than their counterparts. That does not have to be the case. So we need somebody who sits on the bench who has seen both sides of the issues, right? We need somebody who is going to be able to apply the law equally. So I've always been somebody who was willing to stand up and fight for justice. So I think I learned that from my dad. My dad was a union representative in the UAW when he worked for General Motors. He worked in the plants. So I saw my dad kind of really advocate for the people on the floor where he worked who were not given the same opportunities as everybody else. So this really stuck with me. When I first became a public servant, I was an assistant public defender. When I practiced here in Galveston County, I was a solo practitioner. And in the course of me practicing as a solo practitioner, I was really able to see firsthand how the county treated certain people. One of the things I think that Galvestonians and people in the county will remember is that the Galveston County court system, its judges and its participants, were sued by the ACLU a couple years in a case called Booth versus the Galveston County. And in that case, what was happening is certain people were being denied bail based on an arbitrary system. So our Constitution says that you are supposed to be released depending on certain factors without bail. It is something that every judge is supposed to consider. But what the ACLU found out was the judges here in Galveston County were simply rubber stamping what the police and the DA said somebody was going to get for a bond. And that's just not the law. So over the course of litigation, we, the taxpayers, ended up having to pay untold dollars, but we know it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend this lawsuit. I was actually somebody that stood up and acted as a witness in the federal case. I went to federal court and I stood up and I advocated for those who were unable to do it for themselves, and I told the truth. So I have never been one to shy away from doing the right thing. So one of the other things that I see recently is something that's taking away our rights, more specifically, the Supreme Court case, right, that just came out, the Dobbs decision. So, as a female and somebody who has children herself, I have a daughter. I was especially concerned with the way the court is going, and I don't see that it is stopping anytime soon, right? So, what we know now is today, me as a woman, I literally have less rights than the husband I married, than the son that I bore, and the father who helped create me because of this decision. This decision means that we women are actually second class citizens who do not have full control over our bodies, whereas our counterparts, men, do have absolute control over their bodies. This I have a problem with. And what I worry about is the courts have broadcasted that they really want to take another look at some of these cases that we have considered for years and years and years to be precedent. So one of the cases that I'm concerned with has to do with LGBT rights, right? So one of the cases the court has considered re-examining is a case that took place right here in Texas, and it was only in 2003 in the Lawrence v. Texas case that actually decriminalized certain sexual acts, sodomy. So before 2003, you could actually go to jail for what happened in your bedroom. But we've got those protections now. That is something that is now going to be under reconsideration, in my opinion, by the Supreme Court. Just as our voting rights have come under fire and they have been taken away from us, women's rights have been taken away from us, minority rights have been taken away from us, the LGBTQ um, people now are really looking with a bullet on their a target on their back, because these are cases in case law that have provided us privileges and rights that we've all come to think of as commonplace. But if we're listening to where the court is broadcasting, those are actually cases that they're reconsidering bringing back up. The Supreme Court actually just went back into session yesterday, and we know that they are taking up cases on affirmative action and gay rights. So that is something that definitely concerns me, and that is something that makes me want to get on the bench. So some of the things that I really thought about what I wanted to do if I were to be on the bench was, one, bail reform. So we talked a little bit about that. My policy is going to save the taxpayers money because I'm actually going to follow the law. When I follow the law, nobody's going to sue us, including the ACLU. So the ACLU actually brought up the same lawsuit in Harris County, but as it turns out, Harris County and other judges were like, oh, you're right, we were violating the law, let's work with you and let's make it better and let's make it change. They have actually made a huge change. And while people think that if they are being released without paying a substantial money bond, it means that these people are going to go out and automatically commit more crimes, studies have shown, and the science shows, that's simply not true. People who are released on a non-monetary bond, a personal recognizant bond, are actually more likely to come back to court and face the consequences. So that's a good thing. One of the other things that I'm very much passionate about is alternative resolutions. So this would mean things like drug court and diversionary programs. One of the things that people don't realize is we have a drug court here in Galveston County for people who really think that they have a drug problem and they have been charged with a criminal act. They're allowed to apply to get into a program that kind of diverts them, if you will, out of the court system. What this means is they are on a heightened kind of hybrid probation where it's like on steroids. They are given training. They are under supervision. A lot of times they are in halfway houses. They have to do extra monitoring and extra drug testing, but they're also given counseling and they're given help to help overcome these addictions. A lot of times people act out and they say steal things or they're doing drugs because of their addiction. Now, keeping the drug court full and keeping it full of people who are going to utilize the program is really important to me. The funding is there. It's a win-win situation. If we can get somebody out of the prison system so we, the taxpayers, don't have to pay for that, and we can give them the help that they need so they never go back and do any more criminal charges ever again, that's going to benefit the entire community. I am a big proponent for finding ways to help people. That is definitely one way that we can help people. Now, on the other hand, I have represented in the course of doing criminal work a lot of people that I know simply don't deserve a second chance. So just because I would be sitting on the bench and I know that people have this ability to be diverted and have a second chance, not everyone's going to qualify for it. So one thing that I don't talk a lot about myself is that I've got 5 kids, and actually one of those kids was attacked. He was an adult. He was attacked here in Galveston County by somebody who was already on probation. I went to court and I sat in the proceeding for the state to violate that person's proceeding because that person committed another criminal act specifically against one of my kids. Now, the court system in that case failed me and, in my opinion, failed everybody in this county because the evidence was clear. My child was attacked by somebody with a gun who threatened him, and his probation was not violated. I'm here to tell you, folks, I'm not going to be soft on crime. If you've had a second chance and you're blowing that chance and you're blowing it so that you are changing somebody's life forever, I might just consider giving the maximum penalty if it's recommended to me. So once again, while I will not hesitate to do the right thing, if that means putting somebody in jail for a very, very, very long time because they deserve it, I'm going to do it. So when it comes to equal justice, we touched on that a little bit, and that is actually something that is part of my program and something that I want to ensure happens. So one of my slogans is whether you come from jail or Yale, you are going to get equal justice in my courtroom. So what that means is I'm going to hold people accountable. I'm going to hold individuals accountable. Whether it is a civil suit, you are going to be forced to show the evidence to prove your case. Just like in the criminal system, the DA's office, the prosecutors are going to have to show their evidence in order to prosecute their case. If somebody is not being honest or they are not providing all of the evidence, random sort of penalty against somebody because of what I think they look like. One of the other things that I put on my platform is marijuana reform. While I will only be able to take care of cases that are brought to me about marijuana, I would like people to know that I am a very strong advocate for reformation and decriminalization of marijuana. This is not something where I actually have just jumped. I was making commercials for NORML. That is the group for the National Organization and Legalization of Marijuana Reform. And so I advocate to decriminalize marijuana for quite a long time. I think it's clear, the studies show and the law shows that people of color are disproportionately arrested and disproportionately sentenced when it comes to marijuana charges. I just think